The Bone Tribunal was built for women the court wanted silenced. Its walls were made from the skulls of ancient wolves, each one polished white by moon priests and set into black stone with silver nails through the jaw. There were hundreds of them, thousands, some whispered. Dead alphas, dead war wolves, dead royal beasts whose names had been carved away so their bones could serve the throne. Their empty eye sockets watched every accused woman brought beneath them, and their sealed teeth waited for a song. In Veyrakar, a woman accused of forbidden witchcraft was not allowed to defend herself with words. She had to sing. If her voice carried no dark magic, the bones stayed silent. If her voice carried a curse, the skulls cracked. The court condemned her, and her tongue was cut before moonrise, so no spell could leave her mouth again. Tonight, they brought Mira Ashen to the tribunal, not because anyone had seen her cast a spell, because the Alpha King had heard her voice in his dreams. Mira stood barefoot at the center of the bone hall, wrists bound in pale wolf sinew cord, her plain gray servant dress hanging damp against her skin from the storm outside. Her dark hair had come loose from its braid and clung to her cheeks. She kept her eyes lowered, not in submission, but because the skulls on the wall seemed to know her. Every time she looked up, one of them flickered faintly blue in the sockets. No one else seemed to notice, or perhaps they noticed and pretended not to. That was how courts survived old truths. Around her, the royal court gathered in half circles of fur, silver, and suspicion. Alpha lords stood with hands on sword hilts. Noble women whispered behind moon veils. Temple guards held spears carved from white ash. Above them, on a throne beneath the largest wolf's skull, Alpha King Dacian Vale watched in silence. He was not a man people looked at easily. He was 33, tall and broad-shouldered, with black hair falling slightly over a severe brow and eyes the color of winter steel. A scar cut through one eyebrow, pale against his skin. He wore black armor under a dark wolf fur mantle, and his crown was simple. 5 silver claws welded into a circlet. He looked less like a king chosen by ceremony and more like one dragged from war and never fully returned. But the strangest thing about him was not his scar or his silence. It was his wolf, or the absence of it. Every Alpha King in Veyrakar carried his royal wolf shadow behind him during judgment, a spiritual presence visible when law was spoken. Dacian had none. The court never mentioned it. They said his wolf was sleeping after the northern wars. They said the throne's burden had made the beast quiet. They said many things in careful voices. Mira knew better. She had heard the wolf crying, not in the hall, not with ears, in sleep, for 7 years, since the winter she was brought to the palace kitchens as a nameless orphan. Mira had dreamed of a dark wolf buried beneath white bones. It lay under the earth, chained by a vow written in marrow, its mouth sewn shut with moon thread. It could not howl, it could not rise. But every few nights, when the palace bells went silent and the cold settled deep into the servant walls, it whispered one word into her dreams. Sing. Mira had never sung. Not once. Her mother had made her promise before she died. Hide your voice, little ember. Bones remember what men bury. If they hear you, they will come. Mira had obeyed. She learned silence the way other girls learned embroidery. She scrubbed ash from hearthstones, carried water, folded linens, let nobles forget her name before they finished saying it. When others sang harvest songs in the kitchens, she moved outside and counted rain. When temple choirs passed through the palace, she bit the inside of her cheek until blood filled her mouth so no note could rise. Then 3 nights ago, the Alpha King collapsed during a moon council. He had not fainted. Kings did not faint, the court insisted. But Mira had seen him from the corridor, one hand braced against the council table, his eyes gone silver-white, as if something inside him had woken and found only pain. Before the guards shut the doors, he looked straight toward her hiding place and spoke the line she had heard in dreams for years. "Why does she know my wolf's grave?" No one had touched Mira that night. The next morning, the old moon temple arrived. Priestess Saevra came in white robes, stitched with bone beads, her silver hair coiled beneath a crescent veil, her face calm with the terrible patience of someone who believed cruelty became holy if done slowly enough. She claimed the Alpha King had been dream-cursed by a secret witch in the palace. She claimed only the Bone Tribunal could prove which woman carried forbidden voice magic. By sunset, servants were questioned. By moonrise, Mira was named, because one kitchen boy had once heard her humming in fever, because a maid found blue ash under her pillow, because when Priestess Saevra passed her in the corridor, every bone bead on the woman's robe rattled as if laughing. Now Mira stood beneath the tribunal wall, while Saevra addressed the court. "Mira Ashen," the priestess said, her voice smooth and cold. "Nameless servant of the lower hearths, you are accused of concealing forbidden witch blood, invading the dreams of Alpha King Dacian Vale, and binding your voice to his royal wolf." Mira lifted her head. "I did not invade his dreams." A murmur moved through the hall. Servants accused before the tribunal were expected to tremble, not answer. Saevra's pale eyes narrowed. "Then why did the king speak of you before witnesses?" Mira looked toward Dacian. His gaze had not left her. There was suspicion in his face. Of course there was. He had been told she was dangerous. He had been told her voice might be the thing killing his wolf. But beneath suspicion, she saw something else. Something he hid so well the court might have missed it. Recognition. Not of her face, of the silence around her. Dacian leaned forward slightly. "Have you heard my wolf?" The court stopped breathing. Priestess Saevra turned sharply. "Your Majesty, the tribunal must begin before contamination deepens." But Dacian ignored her. His eyes stayed on Mira. "Answer." Mira's hands tightened in the wolf-sinew bonds. A lie might save her for an hour. Truth might kill her before dawn. "Yes," she whispered. The skulls in the wall flickered blue. Dacian's jaw tightened. "Where?" Mira swallowed. "Under bones." A sound passed through the court, not speech, not gasp. Fear trying to become order. Priestess Saevra stepped forward. "Enough. The accused admits contact with the royal beast. The tribunal will judge the nature of her voice." Two guards shoved Mira toward the center circle. The floor beneath her feet was inlaid with white bone dust and black moonstone. At its edge stood a bowl of water mixed with powdered wolf fang. Saevra dipped 2 fingers into it and marked Mira's throat with a cold line. "If your voice is clean," the priestess said, "the dead will remain dead." Mira looked at the wall of skulls. Every empty eye socket seemed brighter now. "And if they answer?" she asked. Saevra smiled faintly. "Then the court will know what you are." Dacian's voice cut through the hall. "And if they answer something you do not expect?" The priestess went still. For the first time, her calm cracked by a hair. Then she turned back to Mira. "Sing." Mira could not breathe. Her mother's warning rose inside her. "Hide your voice. Bones remember what men bury. But beyond the fear, beneath the court, beneath the stone, beneath the skulls nailed into walls," she heard it again. The buried wolf, not commanding, begging, "Sing." Mira closed her eyes. She released one broken note. The entire tribunal shook. Every torch went blue. One wolf's skull split its jaw open with a sound like old ice cracking. Then another, then another. All across the bone wall, the dead wolves opened their mouths and sang back, not a curse, not condemnation, but a name the court had tried to erase. Mira Vaeloria. Priestess Saevra stumbled backward. Dacian rose from the throne. The skulls sang louder, their empty eyes blazing with moonfire. Last daughter of the Bone Singers, Mira's knees nearly failed. She did not know that name, but the dead did. And when the largest skull above the throne opened its jaws, its voice was the deepest of all. Return what was buried. The Alpha King's wolf is not sleeping. It was entombed by oath. Return what was buried. The Alpha King's wolf is not sleeping. It was entombed by oath. The words stayed in the Bone Tribunal, like a blade held against every throat. Mira stood in the center circle, her broken note still trembling on her tongue. The wall of ancient wolf skulls glowed blue-white around her, jaws open, empty sockets burning with moonfire. The court had gathered to watch a servant girl condemned. Instead, the dead had sung her true name, Mira Vaeloria. Last daughter of the Bone Singers, she did not know that name. She only knew Mira Ashen, the name given to a lower hearth servant with soot on her hands and no history worth asking about. Ashen because she slept near the kitchen fires. Ashen because no one expected ash to remember what it had once been. Priestess Saevra recovered first. Sealed the tribunal. Temple guards rushed toward the wall with crescent bone keys. But the moment one touched a glowing skull, blue fire struck him across the floor. The nobles screamed and stumbled back. Alpha lords half drew their swords, then froze, because no blade could threaten a dead wolf into silence. On the throne steps, Alpha King Dacian Vale stared at Mira. His face was still severe, still guarded, but suspicion had cracked into something more dangerous. Recognition, hunger, fear. For years his wolf had been absent, and now the dead had named the one woman whose voice had reached it. Mira wanted to step away. The wolf sinew cord around her wrists tightened by itself. She gasped as the pale binding cut into her skin. Saevra lifted one hand, murmuring temple words under her breath. The accused remains bound until her voice is judged. Dacian's gaze dropped to Mira's wrists. Release her. Saevra did not bow. Your Majesty, if she is bone, singer blood, her voice can compel testimony from wolf remains, undo royal oaths, and expose verdicts sealed for the safety of the realm. The largest skull above the throne opened its jaws wider. The oath was not safety. Saevra bent still. Dacian stepped down from the throne. What oath? The priestess answered too quickly. Dead wolves speak in fragments. The skull's blue eyes flared. Dead wolves remember whole. Moonfire burst from the bone wall, forming a vision in the air. The court saw Dacian, years younger, newly crowned, standing bare-chested in a circle of powdered fang beneath the old moon temple. Behind him towered his royal wolf shadow, dark silver and magnificent, its eyes furious and alive. Around him stood priestesses in white veils. Saevra was among them, holding a long needle carved from wolf rib. A voice said, "If the king's wolf remains unbound, he will hear the bone singer child when she wakes." Young Dacian turned sharply. What child? Saevra drove the rib needle into the circle. The vision shattered before it could show more. Dacian's face hardened. Continue. Saevra lifted her hand. The sinew cord around Mira's wrists tightened again, and pain flashed up her arms. The skulls snarled. Dacian moved before the court could react. In 2 strides, he crossed into the witch song circle and closed his hand around the binding between Mira's wrists. The cord burned his palm. He did not let go. Mira stared at him, stunned. No Alpha King was supposed to touch an active tribunal binding. No man with a wounded wolf was supposed to step inside forbidden song law, but Dacian's jaw only tightened as smoke curled from his skin. Saevra's voice sharpened. "Your Majesty, if you break trial law..." Dacian snapped the cord. The sound cracked through the hall like bone splitting. Mira's hands fell free. At once, every wolf skull lowered its jaw. Not in attack, in respect. The court erupted. Saevra's calm finally fractured. "You do not know what you have freed." Dacian looked at his burned palm, then at Mira's raw wrists. "No, but I am beginning to know what you kept bound." Mira should have thanked him. She did not. Rescue could become a chain if accepted too quickly. Instead, she held her wrists close and whispered, "Why did the bones call me Vaeloria?" The skulls answered with song. The floor beneath Mira turned translucent, and a memory appeared below the bone dust. A woman running through a snow-dark forest with an infant wrapped in grey cloth. The woman had Mira's eyes and blood on her mouth. Temple riders followed with white spears. At a hollow tree, the woman pressed the child into a servant man's arms. "If she sings, they will hear her," the woman whispered. "Hide her in ash. Hide her where no one listens." The servant wept. "And you?" The woman looked back toward the riders. "I will give them a louder death." The memory changed. The same woman stood in the Bone Tribunal years earlier, wrists chained, head lifted. Saevra faced her with the rib needle. The woman sang one full note, and every skull in the wall blazed blue. A hidden chamber opened beneath the throne, revealing rows of buried wolf bones marked with royal oaths. Then white fire cut the vision apart. The woman fell. Mira's breath broke. "My mother." The largest skull answered. Softer now. Seren Vaeloria. Last bone. Singer before the daughter. Mira swayed. She had not been orphaned by fever. She had not been nameless. Her mother had been judged here, silenced here, erased here, and Mira had grown up scrubbing ash beneath the same court that buried her bloodline. Dacian's voice came low beside her. "I did not know." Mira looked at him. "You were in the vision." "Yes." "You asked what child?" "Yes." "And then you forgot." The accusation landed. He did not look away. Saevra stepped forward. "Because memory was sealed for the realm. Bone singers can wake testimony from the dead. No court can survive if every grave may speak." Mira turned toward her. "No cruel court can." The skulls flared. "Truth." Dacian looked at Saevra. "Where is my wolf?" The question emptied the hall. The Bone Tribunal answered, before the priestess could. The black stone beneath the throne split open. From below rose the sound Mira had heard for 7 years in dreams. A wolf trying to howl through a mouth sewn shut. Dacian staggered. Mira felt the sound hook beneath her ribs. The largest skull spoke. "Beneath the tribunal lies the grave of oaths. There the king's wolf was buried awake." Saevra whispered, "Do not open it." Dacian's eyes turned deadly cold. "But the dead wolves," addressed Mira. "Only a bone singer may enter." A stairway of black bone opened beneath the throne, descending into darkness. From below, the trapped wolf whispered in the voice from her dreams, "Sing me down, sing me down." The trapped wolf's whisper rose from the stairway beneath the throne, and the Bone Tribunal answered with a low hum. Mira stood at the edge of the black-bone steps, her freed wrists burning where the sinew cord had cut her skin. Cold air breathed upward from below, carrying the scent of old earth, moonlit marrow, and buried grief. Each stair looked carved from wolf ribs, pale and curved, descending into darkness that pulsed faintly blue. The court backed away. Dacian did not. He stood beside her with his burned palm still smoking, his face carved into royal control. But Mira saw the pain under it. The voice below had reached the empty place where his wolf should have answered. Priestess Saevra lifted her chin. "If she enters the grave of oaths, She can unseal verdicts older than your reign. She can wake bones buried for the realm's survival. Mira looked at her. You mean she can make them testify? The skulls in the wall flared blue. Truth. Dacian's gaze stayed on the stair. Can I descend? The largest skull above the throne answered. The king may not enter. The oath will tighten around what remains of his beast. A flicker of rage crossed Dacian's face. Then I wait. Mira almost laughed, but the sound died in her throat. Kings do not wait for servants. His eyes moved to her. You are not only a servant. That is what people say when they discover a use for someone. The words struck him. Good. Mira needed him to feel the shape of that wound before he tried to dress it as destiny. She had been nameless an hour ago. Now the court knew her blood could open buried things. And suddenly, every powerful person looked at her, as if her body had become a key. Dacian did not argue. That was the first answer she respected. Below, the wolf whispered again, weaker now. Mira. Her true name in that buried voice pulled her forward. She stepped onto the first stair. Blue light spread beneath her foot. The tribunal dimmed behind her. The skulls on the wall began to sing softly, not loudly enough to shake the hall this time, but enough to guide her downward. As she descended, memories flickered along the ribstone. Mira Vaeloria, running through snow with an infant. Sayavra's riders following. A servant hiding a child in the ash kitchens. Dacian's young face going blank as moon thread sealed something behind his eyes. Mira gripped the bone rail. It felt too much like a spine. Dacian's voice came from above. Mira. She stopped, but did not turn. If the oath harms you, you cannot follow, I know. Then do not make promises from where you cannot reach me. Silence. Then he said, quietly, come back, if you choose. Choice. The word settled inside her more deeply than command would have. Mira continued down. At the bottom, the passage opened into a chamber vast enough to hold a buried moon. Rows of wolf bones circled a central pit. Every skull had its jaws sewn shut with silver moon thread. Every rib cage bore old royal seals. Names had been scraped from the bones, until only wounds remained. In the pit lay Dacian's wolf. It was enormous, dark silver, and not dead. That was the horror. It was buried alive beneath oath chains, its paws pinned by white bones, its mouth stitched closed with moon thread. Its eyes opened when Mira entered, and the grief inside them nearly drove her to her knees. For 7 years, she had heard this wolf in dreams. She had thought it was only asking to be freed. Now she understood it had also been protecting her, calling softly, never loudly enough for Sayavra to find her too soon. Mira approached the pit. Why did they bury you? The wolf could not speak with its sewn mouth, but the bones could. One skull split its thread and rasped. Because the king heard the bone singer child. Another answered, because his wolf would have led him to her. Another said, because the temple stole the verdict. Blue light filled the chamber. A vision rose from the pit. Young Dacian standing in the old moon temple, newly crowned, his wolf, shadow, towering behind him. Sayavra and the priestesses circled him in white veils. Young Dacian said, there is a girl in the palace. My wolf hears her when I sleep. Sayavra answered, a witch child. Mira Vaeloria's last curse. She is not a curse, young Dacian said. My wolf knows her voice. Sayavra lifted the rib needle. Before he could move, moon thread shot across the circle and pierced the wolf shadow's jaws. The beast roared once, then went silent. Dacian's eyes emptied as the oath sealed over his memory. The vision collapsed. Mira stood shaking. They had not simply erased her from the king. They had buried the only creature that knew she was alive. The wolf in the pit lifted one bound paw, and dragged its claw through the dust. A symbol appeared, a spiral of teeth and moonlight. Mira knew it without being taught. The Bone Singer seal. Her throat tightened. I do not know the song. The wolf's eyes softened. The chamber waited. Mira remembered her mother's warning. Bones remember what men bury. Maybe hiding her voice had kept her alive, but silence had kept the wolf in chains. She knelt at the edge of the pit and opened her mouth. At first, only a broken breath came out. Then, one low, trembling note. The chamber answered. Every sewn jaw in the grave of oaths began to split open, and from thousands of wolf bones, the buried verdict started singing back. The buried verdicts sang back in voices older than the throne. At first, Mira could not understand them. Thousands of wolf bones cried out at once, their sewn jaws splitting open, moon thread snapping like frozen harp strings. The grave of oaths trembled beneath her knees. Blue fire ran through every rib cage, every scraped name, every royal seal carved into bone. Then the chaos narrowed into one deep chord, and the dead began to testify. False oath, stolen verdict, buried witness. Wolf silenced. Mira pressed both hands to the edge of the pit as the sound entered her bones. This was not power the way Saevra had described it. It did not feel like control. It felt like standing in the center of a storm of grief and choosing not to turn away. Dacian's wolf lay below her, still pinned under oath chains, its stitched mouth trembling as the dead spoke around it. Its silver eyes never left Mira's face. A vision rose from the bones. The court above appeared as it had 7 years ago. Mira Vaeloria stood in the Bone Tribunal with blood on her lips and her head held high. Priestess Saevra faced her before the skull wall, holding the rib needle. Dacian stood nearby, young and pale, his gaze unfocused after the first sealing spell. Zeren sang one full note. The tribunal opened. Beneath the throne, the grave of oaths was revealed for the first time, filled with wolf bones marked by false royal verdicts. Seren pointed at the skulls and cried, "The temple has buried testimony from every wolf that refused to lie for the crown." The court had panicked. Saevra had not. She stepped forward and drove the rib needle through Seren's throat. Mira flinched as if she felt it herself. The vision continued. Seren fell, but her blood struck the tribunal floor and burned blue. Before Saevra could silence her completely, Seren spoke one final word. "Daughter." The vision shattered. Mira's breath came raggedly. Her mother had not died because she was dangerous. She died because she had opened the grave and shown the court what was hidden beneath its law. The wolf bones sang again. "Daughter returns." Song unfinished. Verdict waiting. Mira looked down at Dacian's wolf. "How do I free you?" The wolf lifted its bound paw again and scratched 3 marks into the dust. Bone, blood, crown. The bones answered. Bone remembers. Blood names. Crown confesses. Mira understood the first 2. Her voice had woken the bones. Her blood carried Seren's name. But the 3rd mark turned her cold. The crown confesses. Above her, through the open stair, she heard shouting. The court was moving. Saevra's voice cut through the noise, sharp with command. "Seal the lower grave. If she wakes the wolf fully, she will turn the king against his own temple." Dacian's voice answered, low and furious. "The temple buried my wolf alive. For your reign, for my obedience." A crash sounded above. Mira rose from the pit edge and looked toward the stairs. She could stay below and keep singing, but the bones had been clear. Dacian's wolf could not be freed by song alone. The king had to confess what had been taken from him before the same court that benefited from his silence. The wolf's eyes softened, as if it knew what she had realized. Mira whispered, "I will come back." The wolf closed its eyes once. Trust. She climbed. By the time she reached the tribunal, the hall had become a battlefield of law instead of blades. Temple guards blocked the skull wall. Alpha lords argued in low, frightened voices. Saevra stood before the throne, bone beads rattling on her white robes, her face no longer calm but bright with righteous anger. Dacian stood in the center circle, with his sword drawn, though he had not used it. When Mira emerged from the stair, every skull on the wall turned toward her. The court went silent. Saevra pointed at her. There. Look at what rises from the grave when forbidden blood is indulged. She has awakened buried verdicts without crown permission. Mira stepped fully into the hall. Because the crown buried them without truth. A murmur passed through the nobles. Saevra's eyes narrowed. A servant girl speaks of truth after singing with dead wolves. No, Mira said. Her voice shook, but she held it. Mira Vaeloria's daughter speaks of truth. The skulls flared blue. Dacian looked at her then, and something passed through his face. Not tenderness, not yet, but a painful recognition that she had returned from below with more than fear. She carried witness now. What did you find? He asked. Mira looked at him. Your wolf cannot be freed by my song alone. His jaw tightened. What does it require? The largest skull above the throne answered before she could. The crown confesses. The hall went still. Dacian's eyes lifted to the skull. Confesses what? The bones sang a single word. Need. Saevra's face changed. Mira understood why. An Alpha King was trained never to confess need before the court. Need was weakness. Need gave rivals teeth. But the oath that buried Dacian's wolf had been sealed because the temple convinced the crown that hearing Mira's voice made him vulnerable. To break it, he would have to name that vulnerability openly. Dacian looked at Mira. She did not help him. This could not be dragged from her. It had to come from him. Slowly, Dacian turned to the court. For 7 years I heard a voice in dreams, he said. A girl, singing, when no one else could reach. My wolf followed that voice. I was told it was a curse. I let the temple bury the part of me that knew otherwise. The skulls brightened. Saevra stepped forward. Your Majesty, do not give her power over you. Dacian's voice hardened. You already did, when you buried my wolf because it recognized her. The court gasped. The first oath chain beneath the floor snapped. The sound shook the tribunal. Mira felt it in her chest. Below, the buried wolf moved. Dacian continued, voice rougher now. I needed the voice because it was the only thing my wolf trusted after the war. I needed the truth it carried, and I need what was taken from me returned. Blue fire erupted from the skull wall. The second chain snapped. Saevra's calm broke completely. If you free him, he will remember everything. Dacian turned toward her. Good. The third chain snapped beneath the throne. From below came a howl, no longer muffled. The floor cracked open wider, and Dacian's wolf shadow rose from the grave of oaths, enormous dark silver wounded moon thread still hanging from its jaws. It looked first at the king, then at Mira, and before the court could understand what was happening, the Alpha King's buried wolf lowered its head to the last bone singer. The Alpha King's buried wolf lowered its head to the last bone singer. The court broke. Some nobles stepped backward, as if the gesture itself had teeth. Others dropped to one knee, because their own wolves forced them down before they understood why. Temple guards lifted their spears, then froze when every skull in the tribunal wall opened its jaws and growled. Priestess Saevra stood rigid beneath the blue moonfire, her face drained of all holy calm. Mira could not move. Dacian's wolf stood before her, enormous and dark silver, moon thread still hanging from its stitched mouth. Its body was half shadow, half wound. Oath marks burned across its ribs, chains of pale bone dragged from its shoulders into the cracked floor. Yet its eyes were alive, and it bowed to her, not because she commanded it, because it remembered. Dacian stood a few paces away, breathing hard, his face stripped of the cold distance the court had mistaken for strength. Without his buried wolf hidden beneath law, he looked more dangerous, not less. More whole, more wounded, more awake. Saevra found her voice first. This is exactly why her bloodline was sealed. The wolf raised its head. Mira felt the growl before she heard it. Saevra pointed at the beast. Look at him. The royal wolf bows to forbidden song. If the bone singer speaks, the king's own beast lowers itself. That is not witness. That is control. Fear moved through the court. Mira saw it spreading. A moment ago, they had watched a buried wrong rise from beneath the throne. Now Saevra was teaching them how to fear the woman who revealed it. Mira's throat tightened. She had sung one note, and already they wanted to make her responsible for everything the bones chose to say. Dacian stepped beside his wolf. If she controlled him, he would have come out whole. The words cut through the hole. The wolf turned its wounded head toward the king. Dacian looked at the moon thread, still sewn through the beast's jaws, and something dark crossed his face. He bowed, because she reached what I was taught to abandon. The skulls flared. Truth. Saevra's eyes narrowed. Then let her finish what she began. Let her sing the royal wolf fully free before the court. Let us see whether she releases him or claims him. Mira went cold. There was the trap. If she refused, the court would call her afraid of truth. If she sang, and anything went wrong, Saevra would name her a witch who tried to possess the Alpha King's wolf. The priestess did not need to win honestly. She only needed the court to panic at the right moment. Dacian turned to Mira. No. The single word surprised her. Saevra smiled faintly. Your Majesty? Dacian did not look away from Mira. She will not be forced to sing. The wolf skulls hummed low. Mira searched his face. Your wolf is still bound. I know. If I do nothing, the oath remains. I know. And if I sing, your court may turn on me. His jaw tightened. I know that too. It should have been easy then. Refuse. Survive. Let the king carry the cost of what his temple had done. But the wolf's eyes were on her, and inside them she saw 7 years of dreams, 7 years of a buried beast whispering softly enough not to expose her too soon. It had protected her while asking to be saved. Mira looked at Saevra. I will sing. Dacian's face hardened. Mira, not because she demands it. Mira lifted her chin, though her voice trembled. Because the bones have not finished, the tribunal answered with blue light. Mira stepped toward the wolf. Its head lowered until its scarred muzzle hovered before her. The moon thread across its mouth pulsed with temple magic. She could see knots tied into it, each one marked with a name. Saevra, the old temple, the crown council, and one mark she did not recognize, a black crescent burned into bone. What is that? She whispered. The largest skull answered. The first oath maker. Saevra's hand twitched. Mira saw. So you were not the first, Mira said. The priestess's expression sharpened. Careful, child. Mira almost laughed. That is what people say when truth is close. The skulls rattled in approval. Mira placed her hand near the wolf's stitched jaw, not touching yet. May I? The wolf closed its eyes. Permission. She set her fingers against the moon thread. Pain burst through her throat. A vision struck her. An older tribunal, before Dacian's reign, a black crescent priestess standing before Mira Vaeloria. A royal infant crying in the distance. Wolf. Skulls, screaming behind sealed jaws. Saevra younger, kneeling beside the first oathmaker, learning how to bury testimony and call it peace. Then the vision broke. Mira staggered. Dacian caught her elbow, then released her at once. Saevra's voice rose. You see, the song poisons her. No, Mira whispered. The thread does. She looked at the court. The oath did not begin with Dacian. It began before him. The skull wall blazed. The dead wolves sang the unknown mark aloud. Crescida Munfein. Saevra's face went white. The black crescent burned brighter across the wolf's muzzle. Dacian turned to the priestess. Who is Cressida? Saevra said nothing. The dead answered for her. First priestess of the sealed tribunal, founder of the false bone law, blood ancestor of Saevra Moonvein. The hall erupted. Mira understood then. Saevra had not protected tradition. She had inherited a crime and kept feeding it, because exposing the first lie would destroy her bloodline's authority. Saevra lifted both hands. The skulls screamed. Silver nails shot from the wall, tearing free from ancient bone and flying toward Mira like knives. Dacian moved first, but his wolf was faster. The wounded beast threw itself between Mira and the silver nails. Several struck its shadow body, and Dacian dropped to one knee with a harsh gasp. Mira felt fear turn into fire. She opened her mouth and sang. This time, the note was not broken. It was sharp, clear, and full of every buried name the tribunal had tried to scrape away. The silver nails stopped in midair. One by one, they turned toward Saevra. The priestess stepped back. The Bone Tribunal spoke through Mira's song. The dead will not be nailed shut again. The dead will not be nailed shut again. Mira's song held the silver nails in midair. For one breath, the Bone Tribunal looked frozen between judgment and war. The nails hovered inches from Saevra's face, each one glowing blue where Mira's voice wrapped around it. Dacian knelt beside his wounded wolf shadow, one hand braced against the floor, breathing hard as if every nail that had struck the beast had gone through his own ribs. The court watched in terror, no longer certain whether the danger was the secret witch singing before them, or the priestess who had tried to kill her with sacred metal. Saevra lowered her hands slowly. Her face was pale, but not defeated. You think the bones belong to you because they answer, she said. They answered your mother too, and look where her song left her. Mira's throat burned. The note trembled, almost breaking. Dacian looked up. Mira, not a command, an anchor. She steadied. The nails turned fully toward Saevra. The priestess's eyes flashed. If you strike me, you prove everything I warned them about. Mira stopped singing. The nails fell harmlessly to the floor. Saevra smiled faintly, thinking she had won that moment. Mira looked at her and said, I do not need to strike you. The bones only need to speak. The skull wall blazed so bright, every noble shielded their eyes. A new vision opened across the tribunal. Cressida Moonvein, Saevra's ancestor, standing in the first Bone Tribunal generations ago. Before her knelt a young bone singer man with blood on his lips, surrounded by wolf skulls glowing blue. The man had exposed a royal massacre hidden beneath treaty law. Instead of letting the court hear the dead wolves' full testimony, Cressida ordered silver nails driven through their jaws. She called it peacekeeping. She called it protection. She wrote the first false bone law. Testimony from the dead could only be heard if the temple approved the song. The vision shifted. Saevra, as a girl, watching the same law recited by her mother. Saevra, as a young priestess, sealing the jaws of wolves who tried to accuse noble houses. Saevra standing over Mira Vaeloria, Mira's mother, driving the rib needle through her throat because Seren had nearly opened the grave of oaths. Then Saevra standing beside young Dacian, burying his wolf because it heard the hidden bone singer child. The court saw all of it. Saevra's voice cut through the vision. Yes, I preserved the realm from chaos. The skulls hissed. Dacian rose slowly, pain still visible in his face. His wolf shadow stood with him, wounded but no longer bowing. Moon thread still sealed its jaws, but the thread had begun to fray. "You preserved your temple," Dacian said. "Saevra turned on him, and your throne. Do not pretend innocence because a pretty servant sang your wolf awake. You sat above this tribunal for years. You signed verdicts. You accepted silence because it made ruling easier." The words struck. The court waited for Dacian to deny them. He did not. Mira watched him carefully. This mattered more than any sword drawn for her. If he answered with pride, the oath would tighten again. The bones had said it clearly. Crown confesses. Dacian looked at the skull wall, then at Mira, then at the court. "I accepted a silence I did not understand, because it served me," he said. "That is guilt enough." The tribunal shook. Below the floor, another oath chain snapped. Saevra's expression faltered. Dacian continued, voice rough but steady. "Every verdict signed under sealed bone testimony will be reopened. Every woman condemned by tribunal song will have her case heard again, and the old moon temple will answer for every jaw it nailed shut." Panic moved through the nobles. One alpha lord stepped forward. "Your Majesty, that could unmake half the court's inheritance claims. Then half the court may learn what it inherited." The wolf skulls roared. "Truth." Saevra's calm finally burned away. "Then I invoke temple emergency law." She struck the floor with her bone staff. The black crescent mark on Dacian's wolf flared. The beast collapsed with a silent cry. Dacian fell to one knee again, hand at his throat. Moonthread tightened across the wolf's mouth, pulling it backward, toward the grave of oaths. Saevra lifted her staff toward Mira. If the bone singer dies before completing the release, the wolf remains sealed, and the court survives. Temple guards surged forward. Dacian tried to rise. Mira stepped in front of him. For once. Not because she was ordered. Not because she was useful. Because the wolf had protected her. Because her mother had died, with her song unfinished. Because the dead were finally being heard. She sang. This note was lower than before. Deeper. It did not stop the gods by force. It woke the bones beneath their armor. Wolf tooth clasps, fang charms, old oath rings, battle trophies, taken from dead beasts. Every bone fragment on every god began to vibrate. One by one, the gods froze. Their own weapons refused them. Mira's voice filled the hall, and the skulls sang beneath it. Witness before blood, truth before temple, name before verdict. The black crescent on Dacian's wolf cracked. Saevra screamed and thrust her staff toward Mira, but the largest skull above the throne opened its jaws and caught the spell in blue fire. Mira turned to Dacian. His face was pale, but his eyes were locked on hers. "I cannot break the final thread alone," she said. "What do you need? Your wolf has no mouth. Give him yours." The court went silent. Saevra staggered. No. Dacian understood. So did Mira. If he let his buried wolf speak through him, every hidden pain, every stolen memory, every need the crown had taught him to bury, would pass through his own voice before the court. It was not battle. It was exposure. Dacian stood. He placed one hand over his throat. Then he looked at his wolf and said, "Speak through me." The moon thread snapped from the wolf's jaws and wrapped around the king's mouth. Blood ran from Dacian's lips, but when he opened them, the voice that came out was not only his, it was the buried wolf's howl, shaped into words. Mira Vaeloria was never the curse. The tribunal cracked from floor to ceiling. She was the key, hidden from me. Saevra backed away. Dacian's wolf spoke through him one final time, and every skull in the wall bowed. "Release the daughter, and I will remember the king. Release the daughter, and I will remember the king." Dacian's wolf spoke through his mouth, and the Bone Tribunal split open with blue fire. The moon thread wrapped around the Alpha King's lips burned white, then black, then vanished into ash. Dacian staggered, one hand braced against the cracked floor, blood at the corner of his mouth. Behind him, his dark silver wolf shadow lifted its head for the first time without stitches sealing its jaws. It breathed. The whole court felt it. Every alpha in the hall dropped to one knee. Not from command, from recognition. The royal wolf had returned. Mira stood before him with her throat burning from song, her hands still shaking, the names of the dead echoing inside her ribs. She had imagined power would feel like fire. It did not. It felt like carrying too many voices and refusing to let one of them disappear. Priestess Saevra backed away slowly. Her white robes were no longer immaculate. Blue ash stained the bone beads at her throat. The black crescent mark on her staff had cracked down the center, yet her eyes remained sharp, with the desperate conviction of someone who would rather burn the truth than live beneath it. "You think this is freedom?" she whispered. "A king with his wolf restored by forbidden song? A court ruled by dead testimony? Veyrakar will fracture before dawn." Dacian straightened. His wolf shadow rose behind him, wounded but enormous, its silver eyes fixed on Saevra. "No, Veyrakar was already fractured. You simply taught us not to hear the bones breaking." The skulls along the wall glowed. "Truth." Saevra's gaze cut to Mira. "And you? You believe he will protect you now. Kings protect miracles, until miracles become inconvenient." Mira did not answer quickly, because the priestess was not entirely wrong. Dacian had broken her bonds. He had confessed before the court. His wolf had named her key, not curse, but none of that erased what kings were trained to do with rare power. Mira knew better than to walk from silence straight into devotion and call it freedom. Dacian looked at her as if he understood the pause. Then he turned to the court. "Mira Vaeloria is under no royal claim." A murmur spread. Saevra's expression twitched. Dacian continued, voice hard enough to cut stone. "Her voice is not crown property. Her bloodline is not temple evidence. No hand will bind her. No priest will test her. No lord will demand song from her without her consent." The Bone Tribunal flared so bright, the nobles shielded their eyes. Mira's breath caught, despite herself. It was not love, not yet. It was law-bending, and that was more useful than tenderness in a hall built for punishment. Saevra struck fast. She pulled a hidden rib blade from her sleeve and slashed her own palm across the black crescent staff. Blood ran into the crack. The broken mark ignited red. "The temple rejects the king's confession," she cried. "Emergency burial law remains." The floor beneath Mira opened. Not a stair this time. A mouth. White bones surged upward, trying to cage her legs. Dead wolf ribs curved around her like prison bars. The skulls on the wall howled in protest, but Saevra's blood forced the old law awake one final time. Dacian lunged toward her. Mira lifted one hand. "No." He stopped. So did the court. Mira looked down at the bone cage rising around her. Fear climbed her throat, but beneath it came her mother's voice. "Bones, remember what men bury. Then let them remember this." Mira sang one note, not loud, not sharp, but clear enough to enter every bone in the hall. The cage stopped closing. She placed both hands on the rib bars and spoke, "I am not evidence." The ribs trembled. "I am not a curse." The wolf skulls answered with a low harmony. "I am Mira Vaeloria's daughter. I am the last bone singer, and I do not belong to the grave you made for my mother." The bone cage shattered outward into blue dust. Saevra screamed as the dust struck her staff. The black crescent split completely. Behind her, the wall of skulls shifted, revealing a hidden alcove sealed behind layers of old temple wax. Inside lay a small bone flute wrapped in grey cloth. Mira knew it before anyone named it. Her mother's songbone. The tribunal went silent. Saevra's face emptied of color. "Do not touch that." Mira walked toward the alcove. Dacian moved beside her, but not ahead. His wolf shadow followed, lowering its head whenever the skulls sang her name. Mira lifted the flute from the cloth. The moment her fingers touched it, a final memory opened in the air. Mira Vaeloria kneeling in the tribunal before her death, hiding the flute inside the wall with bloodied hands. Her voice was nearly gone, but she whispered to the skulls, "When my daughter returns, give her the song I could not finish." Mira closed her eyes. For the first time, she wept. Not loudly, not brokenly. One silent tear, warm against her cheek. Dacian said nothing. Good. The court did not deserve to hear him comfort what his throne had helped bury. Saevra lifted the rib blade again. If she plays it, every sealed verdict opens. Mira turned. Then every sealed verdict opens. She raised the songbone to her lips. Dacian's wolf stepped between her and the court, not to hide her, but to guard her choice. Mira played. The note was thin at first. Then the skulls joined. The entire Bone Tribunal sang with her mother's unfinished voice. Hidden chambers cracked open beneath the walls. Names erased from verdict stones burned blue across the floor. Women condemned as witches. Servants silenced as traitors. Wolves buried as oathbreakers. The dead all began to testify. Saevra fell to her knees. Not from remorse, from fear. Above the throne, the largest skull opened its jaws and spoke the verdict her temple had buried for 7 years. Mira Vaeloria was innocent. Mira lowered the flute, trembling. The skull's eyes blazed brighter, and Priestess Saevra Moonvein murdered her to keep the Alpha King's wolf from finding the daughter. Mira Vaeloria was innocent, and Priestess Saevra Moonvein murdered her to keep the Alpha King's wolf from finding the daughter. The verdict struck the Bone Tribunal with the force of a falling crown. For one breath, no one moved. The skull wall burned blue from floor to ceiling. Names long scraped from history glowed across the black stone beneath Mira's feet. The songbone flute trembled in her hand, still warm from her mother's unfinished note. Around the hall, noble faces shifted from horror to calculation, from calculation to fear. Saevra remained on her knees, not humbled, cornered. "You speak of innocence as if it can feed a kingdom," she said, her voice raw. Mira Vaeloria would have opened every sealed verdict, every noble inheritance, every execution, every old war claim. She would have drowned the realm in dead accusations. Mira looked at her. She would have let the dead speak. The dead do not govern. "No," Dacian said, "but they remember what the living built on their bones." His wolf shadow stood behind him, wounded but fully awake, silver eyes fixed on Saevra. The court still knelt beneath the pressure of its return. Dacian did not ask them to rise. The largest skull spoke again. Judgment remains unfinished. The tribunal floor cracked open in a wide circle. Beneath it, a hidden archive rose slowly from the grave of oaths. Black stone tablets, bone ledgers, wolf skull seals, and thousands of thin silver strips carved with names. Each strip was tied to a verdict. Each verdict had been sealed by temple law. Mira felt the weight of them like hands pressing against her chest. Too many. If every verdict opened at once, the court would fracture into panic. Saevra knew it. The nobles knew it. Even Dacian saw the danger. Truth was not simple just because it was necessary. Saevra lifted her chin. "Open them then. Let every dead grievance walk into the hall. Let fathers accuse sons. Let packs question bloodlines. Let old executions become fresh wars. See how long your king protects you when the realm burns." Fear moved through the court again. This time, Mira understood why. The dead were not gentle, simply because they had been wronged. Some testimony would be clean, some would be complicated, some would unmake families that had lived on comfortable lies for generations. Saevra had used that fear to justify silence, but fear was not entirely false. Mira tightened her grip on the flute. Dacian looked at her. He did not command. "What do you choose?" he asked. The question held the hall still. Mira looked at the archive, at the glowing names, at Saevra, at the wolf that had whispered to her in dreams for years. Then she thought of her mother hiding the songbone in the wall, not so Mira could destroy everything in one furious breath, but so the unfinished song could become witness. "We do not open them all tonight," Mira said. Saevra's mouth curved. "Afraid?" "Yes." The honesty silenced the priestess. Mira lifted her chin. "Afraid of turning truth into a flood no one can survive. Afraid of letting the court use chaos as proof you are right. Afraid of becoming the weapon you accused my mother of being." The skulls glowed softer. "Truth. But fear does not mean silence," Mira continued. "It means we begin where the first lie began." She turned to Dacian. "Your wolf. My mother." The verdict that buried them both. The archive shifted. One black tablet rose from the rest and floated into the air. On it was carved Mira Vaeloria's name, crossed out with white temple wax. Beside it was Dacian's royal wolf mark, sealed under Saevra's blood. Dacian's face hardened. Saevra stood suddenly. "That verdict is temple property." Dacian's wolf growled. Mira raised the songbone. "No, it is testimony." She played one note. The wax melted. The tablet opened. A vision filled the tribunal. Mira Vaeloria standing accused, refusing to kneel. Saevra declaring her a witch who had snared the king's wolf. Young Dacian struggling to reach the circle, held back by temple guards and memory spells. Seren turning toward him, not with fear, but warning. "If they bury your wolf," Seren said in the vision, "they will teach you to call emptiness strength." Saevra struck her down before she could say more. Then came the part the court had never seen. Seren's blood touched the floor and formed a shield around the hidden child far away in the ash kitchens. Around Mira. The same night her mother died, Seren's final song hid Mira from Saevra's search spells. Mira's breath broke. Her mother had not died only exposing truth. She had died buying her daughter silence enough to live. Dacian watched the vision with grief cutting across his face. "I heard her," he whispered. "Before they sealed me, I heard her warning." The tablet shattered into blue light. The first verdict had been reopened, and the tribunal did not collapse. It exhaled. The skulls lowered their jaws in peace. Saevra stared as if that frightened her more than destruction. Mira looked at the court. "This is how we begin. Verdict by verdict. Witness by witness. Not revenge, not silence." Dacian turned to the nobles. "By royal order, the Bone Tribunal is suspended. The old Moon Temple's authority over witch song trials is revoked until every sealed verdict is reviewed under open witness." A lord rose halfway. "Your Majesty, the temple factions will rebel. Then they will rebel against the dead, as well as the crown." Saevra's eyes went cold. "You will not live long enough to issue that order." She drove the rib blade into her own chest. "Not to open something." Black moonfire burst from the wound, and the tribunal skulls screamed as a hidden mark ignited beneath each silver nail. Saevra smiled through blood. "My ancestor built a final law into every bone," she whispered. "If the tribunal falls, the bones burn with it." Blue fire turned red. The skull wall began to crack. Mira felt the songbone in her hand go cold. Dacian's wolf lunged toward the wall, but flames spread too fast. Thousands of dead witnesses began screaming as the old temple's final curse awakened. Saevra looked at Mira, triumphant, even as blood darkened her robes. Choose, Bone Singer. Save the king's wolf, or save the dead. Choose, Bone Singer. Save the king's wolf, or save the dead. Saevra's words cut through the burning tribunal as red fire spread across the skull wall. Mira stood frozen, with the songbone flute in her hand, watching thousands of wolf skulls crack under the hidden curse. The silver nails that had once sealed their jaws now glowed red-hot, burning inward. Every dead witness in the wall screamed at once. Their voices filled the hall with pain so old it had no language left. Dacian's wolf lunged toward the flames, but the black moon fire wrapped around its wounded body and dragged it back. Dacian staggered with it, one hand pressed to his chest, blood darkening his lips. His restored wolf had only just returned. Now Saevra's final law was tearing at it again. The court scattered in panic. Temple guards fled first. Noblewomen screamed. Alpha lords shouted orders no one obeyed. The Bone Tribunal, built to silence accused women, was collapsing because the dead had finally spoken too loudly. Saevra stood near the burning wall, with the rib blade buried in her own chest, smiling through blood. "You cannot hold both. That is what your mother never learned. Witness always demands sacrifice." Mira's throat tightened. Her mother had sacrificed herself to hide Mira. Dacian's wolf had sacrificed its freedom to keep calling softly enough that Saevra would not find her too soon. Every power in this hall had been shaped by loss. Saevra wanted Mira to believe that truth could only continue if someone else was destroyed for it. Dacian forced himself upright. "Save the dead." Mira turned to him. His face was pale, his wolf shadow half bound by black fire, but his eyes were steady. "If my wolf must fall back into the grave so their testimony survives, save them." The words struck her harder than any plea would have. A king willing to lose what had just been returned. But Mira shook her head. "No," Saevra laughed. "Then you choose him." "No," Mira said. "I choose neither cage." She lifted the songbone to her lips. The flute trembled, as if her mother's breath still lived inside it. Mira did not know the song she needed, but she knew the lie she had to refuse, that saving one truth required burying another. She played. The note was not loud. It was clear. At first, the red fire did not stop. Then Dacian's wolf raised its head and opened its jaws. It howled with her. The sound shook the tribunal from floor to ceiling. Not king over witch, not bone singer over beast. Two witnesses, one living and one wounded, answering the same crime. The skull wall flashed blue through the red. Some flames turned white. Some nails cracked. The dead stopped screaming and began to hum beneath Mira's note. Saevra's smile faltered. Dacian understood and stepped forward despite the pain. His voice joined the howl, rough and human. "I confess the crown's part," he said, the words breaking between breaths. "I sat above sealed bones. I signed verdicts without asking why the dead were silent. I benefited from the temple's fear." The red fire weakened. Mira played harder, tears streaking her face. Dacian's wolf pulled free of one black flame chain. "I return the crown's witness to the dead." The largest skull above the throne, cracked and burning, opened its jaws. I accepted. Blue fire exploded outward. The red curse recoiled from the skull wall and rushed back toward Saevra, following the bloodline that had created it. The rib blade in her chest turned black. She gasped, staggering as the moonfire wrapped around her arms, not killing her, but binding her in the same heat she had placed in the bones. "No," she whispered. "I am the temple." Mira lowered the flute. "You are a witness now." Saevra fell to her knees. The burning stopped. One by one, the wolf skulls cooled from red to blue. Cracks remained, scars remained, but the jaws stayed open. No nail returned to seal them. No temple spell closed their mouths. The Bone Tribunal had survived, changed. The court stood in ruins around it. Dacian's wolf shadow stepped forward, still wounded, but free. It lowered its head to Mira again, not as a beast needing rescue, but as one witness greeting another. Then it turned towards Saevra, and the skull wall sang her verdict. Saevra Moonvein, priestess of sealed law, murderer of Mira Vaeloria, binder of the king's wolf, keeper of false verdicts. Saevra lifted her face, hollow with disbelief. The bones did not shout the final word. They spoke it quietly. Answer. Dacian looked to the guards. Take her alive. A few nobles stirred uneasily. One Alpha Lord said, Alive? After this? Mira turned toward him. Dead women have carried enough of this court's guilt. Silence followed. The words landed in places no song could force open. Dacian nodded once. She stands trial under open witness. So does every priest, lord, and counselor named by the reopened verdicts. The Alpha Lord paled and lowered his eyes. Mira looked at the cracked skull wall. Thousands of dead witnesses waited there, no longer screaming, no longer silent. Their testimony would not be easy. It would tear open houses, laws, inheritances, and old graves. But it would happen one verdict at a time. Her mother's song had not finished with destruction. It had finished with return. Dacian came to stand beside her, leaving space between them. You saved both. Mira's voice was hoarse. No, we witnessed both. His eyes softened, but he did not reach for her. Then we begin there. Before she could answer, the largest skull above the throne opened its jaws once more. Its blue fire dimmed to a grave deep glow. One oath remains. The hall went still. Mira felt the songbone turn cold in her hand. Dacian's wolf looked toward the old moon temple doors. The skull spoke again. The first oath. Maker sleeps beneath the temple roots. Cressida Moonvein's bones still hold the law that can bury every voice again. Saevra, bound and shaking, began to laugh softly. Mira looked at Dacian. The tribunal was free, but the root of the silence was still alive beneath the temple. The first oath-maker sleeps beneath the temple roots. The words left the Bone Tribunal colder than the fire had. Mira stood beneath the skull wall with the songbone flute clutched in her hand, her throat raw from singing, her body trembling from every witness she had carried. Around her, the court remained scattered among broken stone, fallen silver nails, and blue burning skulls that no longer allowed silence to look holy. Priestess Saevra knelt in temple bindings, blood dark on her white robes, laughing softly as if ruin had only uncovered a deeper weapon. Dacian's wolf stood beside the king, dark silver and free but wounded. Its eyes were fixed on the old moon temple doors beyond the tribunal hall. Dacian looked at Saevra. What law remains? Saevra lifted her head. Her face was pale, but her smile still knew how to cut. The root law, Cressida's final mercy. If the tribunal is ever overturned by a bone singer, the first oath can wake beneath the temple and seal every speaking bone in Veyrakar. Not only here, every battlefield relic, every wolf grave, every ancestral skull, all testimony returned to silence. Mira's fingers tightened around the flute. Dacian's voice went deadly quiet. You would bury the whole kingdom's dead to preserve your temple. Saevra's eyes flashed. I would preserve the living from drowning in them. The skulls hissed. Mira looked toward the temple doors. Then we go now. Dacian turned to her. You have already carried too much, and, if I stop here, she wins below the roots. His jaw tightened. The old Dacian might have ordered guards ahead, surrounded her, made her safety another form of control. This Dacian looked at his wolf, then at Mira, and said, Then I walk beside you." They took Sevra with them. The path to the old moon temple ran behind the tribunal, through a corridor lined with sealed verdict stones. As they passed, names glowed faintly beneath layers of white wax. Some were women, some wolves, some children of houses the court still praised. Mira felt each name like a breath held too long. At the temple doors, the stone split open before her songbone touched it. Inside, moonlight fell through a broken ceiling onto a dead tree growing from the altar. Its roots were white bone. Its leaves were thin flakes of silver. Beneath it lay a glass coffin wrapped in black crescent chains. Cressida Moonvein's bones slept inside. Not peaceful. Waiting. Sevra whispered from her bindings, "Mother of sealed law." The coffin cracked. A woman's skeleton sat up inside, dressed in rotted priestess silk. A black crescent burned into her skull. Blue fire burned in the empty eye sockets. When she spoke, her voice was dry as old parchment. "Who brings song to my root?" Mira stepped forward. Mira Vaeloria's daughter. The skeleton turned toward her. "The line survived." "Yes, then the error survives," Dacian's wolf growled. But Mira raised one hand. "Let her speak." Cressida's skull tilted. A bone singer. Once opened a battlefield of dead wolves and accused 3 kings at once. The realm burned for 20 winters. Sons killed fathers. Pacts broke bloodlines. I sealed the bones because truth without order becomes hunger. Mira's breath caught. The skulls in the temple walls did not flare blue or red. They waited. This was the danger Sevra had used all along. Not a complete lie, but a wound turned into law. Dacian stepped forward. "So you made yourself the judge of which dead deserved voice." "I made silence survivable." "No," Mira said. "You made silence obedient." The songbone warmed in her hand. Cressida lifted one skeletal hand, and the roots around the coffin began to glow black. Across Veyrakar, distant wolf bones answered. Mira felt them graves under snow, battlefields under moss, ancestral halls beneath noble houses. Every voice that had just begun to stir was being pulled toward one final seal. Dacian's wolf lunged, but the roots wrapped around its legs. Mira raised the flute. Sevra cried, "Do it, and you will wake every buried grievance." Mira looked at her. "No." Then she looked at Cressida. "And I will not let every voice scream at once either." The skeleton paused. Mira lowered the flute slightly. "That was your lie, that the only choices were chaos or silence." The temple skulls glowed faintly. Mira began to sing, not a command, not an opening, but a measure, a rhythm. One note for witness, one note for order, one note for consent. The dead did not burst free. They lined themselves behind the song, verdict by verdict, name by name, waiting to be called instead of forced awake. Dacian understood. He placed his hand over the black roots binding his wolf. By crown confession, no dead testimony will be sealed forever. By crown law, no testimony will be used without open witness. The court will hear them one by one. His wolf howled. Mira's song rose. The songbone flute cracked, but did not break. From its center came Mira Vaeloria's voice, soft and fierce, joining her daughter's. The dead tree shuddered. Cressida's black crescent split across her skull. "No," the skeleton whispered. "If they speak, they will change everything." Mira's eyes filled with tears. Yes, the root law broke. Not with an explosion, with a breath. Across the temple, silver leaves fell from the dead tree and turned to blue ash before touching the floor. The black chains around Cressida's coffin loosened. The skeleton collapsed back into the glass. not destroyed, but emptied of command. Her law no longer owned the bones. Veyrakar fell silent. For the first time, she looked truly lost. The temple doors opened behind them, and the court entered slowly. Nobles, guards, servants, alpha lords, and accused women who had been held in temple cells all stood beneath the broken moonlight. They saw Mira, with the cracked song bone. They saw Dacian's restored wolf. They saw Veyrakar bound before the coffin of the ancestor whose law had ruled them all. Dacian turned to the court. "The Bone Tribunal is ended as a weapon," he said. "It will become a hall of witness. No woman will be forced to sing for her innocence. No wolf bone will be nailed shut. No verdict will stand because fear made silence convenient." The skulls answered in blue light. Truth. Mira felt her mother's presence fade gently from the flute. Not gone. At rest. Dacian faced her before the court. He did not kneel dramatically. He did not claim her voice, her bloodline, or her future. He bowed his head. Enough for every alpha to understand respect without possession. "Mira Vaeloria," he said, voice rough. "My wolf heard you before I did. My crown owes your mother truth. My reign owes your bloodline repair. And I owe you the patience to let trust grow without calling need destiny." Mira's throat ached too much to answer quickly, so she looked at his wolf. The dark silver beast lowered its head, no longer buried, no longer stitched, no longer begging from dreams. Then she looked at the court that had called her witch, servant, threat, and key. "My voice is mine," she said. The skulls glowed. Dacian answered. "Yes." Outside, dawn touched the storm clouds above Veyrakar. The old moon temple bells rang without hands. In the tribunal, sealed names began to appear softly along the walls, not screaming for revenge, not disappearing into silence, but waiting to be heard. Mira walked out beside the Alpha King. Not behind him, not claimed by him, beside him. And for the first time in 7 years, when night eventually came, no wolf cried beneath the bones.